Hey there riders, Moto Journo Kris here today on Harley-Davidson Sportster S, and I wanted to talk about ergonomics and rider fit on this specific bike. Now I'm 180 centimeters, 32-inch inseam, 70-ish kilos, not including the camera bag. And my experience on this bike has actually been really good. So of course, being a cruiser, the seat height on this is exceptionally low. So for most people, jumping on board one of these bikes is going to be exceptionally easy. Cruisers are on the heavier side, however, they are long and low and the weight is held low. So generally speaking, they're a very manageable machine regardless of that weight. And again, as I said, the nice low seat height certainly helps there. Jumping on one of these bikes, I think, is going to be an inviting experience for many people. Whether much larger riders find themselves a little bit cramped is another thing entirely. However, personally, I really like the forward controls and the seat combo. I feel those two work together really well. The wide and tapered back bars as well work well for me. This is quite a high performance cruiser as well. So there is a real consideration of, kind of not getting thrown over the tail of the bike. But I'd say overall, very well handled by the way they've set this bike up, at least for me, as I said, at my 180 centimeters, 32-inch inseam. So hopefully you can see here, basically I've got both feet flat on the ground. There's a lot of spare room there as far as getting those feet down. So even someone significantly shorter than me should be able to get 2 feet down. And if you can only get 1 foot down, that still really, I would say, shouldn't be much of an issue at all. As far as that seat to peg ratio, I will say it's a bit of a sculpted seat which keeps you in place. It's a single seat as well, so just the one person on the bike. Certainly no dramas in that regard for me. Probably the only benefit I would say of having someone on the back on this machine would be to stop all the water coming up your back if it is wet. Apart from that, I definitely think as a solo machine, it's a really cool piece of kit. The forward controls, for me, I'm not hugely familiar with using the forward controls, and I find they are a very natural set of controls that fall to foot perfectly for me. So jumping on this bike in particular, it wasn't a bike where I really felt like I had to reassess my riding to come to terms with those forward controls. Where on some bikes, and particularly on some cruisers, the forward controls have been something I didn't particularly gel with. I don't know if you can see here as well, but obviously that's the foot brake on this side. The foot brake, it's got a Brembo master cylinder. It does take a bit of force at times, particularly if you're on like a bit of an incline or something, but that's very easily done. And what I like most when we talk about the rider triangle on this bike is the pegs to the seat I can lock in. So I can push back in that seat a little bit, which locks me into the seat off the peg. And in that way, while I'm not like locking my leg under the tank as you would on a sports bike, and I'm not taking my weight really through the pegs, I am locking in between that bottom peg and the seat itself, and that kind of makes me more part of the bike as far as the seating position and the feedback and the suspension travel and everything like that. So in that regard, really good. I'm quite happy about that. That's going to vary person to person, of course, though. As far as the bars, they're fairly wide bars. I did find myself with the edges of my hands on those mirrors in gloves at times, and it's, I'd say I wouldn't want the bars any further forward if I'm totally honest, because if that was the case, I'd be more stretched out. I'm kind of, it's the upright kind of slumped seating position on the bike, which is the ideal. If the bars were any further forward, or those, hand controls were any further forward, I'd be really, kind of stretching out to reach them. One thing I will say is I found myself on the freeway kind of locking my fingers over those grips because there's a lot of wind pressure on you because there's no wind protection at all. And that's certainly something to consider. Not that you'd probably ever add wind protection to a bike like this, but there is quite a lot of wind on you when we're talking about the ergonomic. However, the upright seating position does give you the commanding view of the road. It's very kind of neutral. I didn't find it too bad on my back at all. I will mention, of course, that one thing people complain about with this style of bike is that you can quite often get the rear shock transferring big bumps up into your spine quite harshly. When I first picked up the bike, it was a little bit harsh, so I took 3 clicks off the preload to soften it up a little bit, and that actually made a significant difference. I was really, really happy with that, which was a very minor adjustment, and there is a preload adjuster on the rear, so just a hand dial that you turn it far enough and it clicks. Really nice thing to see, so you can do that on the run really easily. You don't need tools or anything like that. The front, haven't touched that at all. Been pretty happy. Over, I won't go into too much detail as far as, you know, the suspension handling, because that'll be in the full review. But I would say from a comfort perspective, this was pretty good, you know, for spending an hour and a half, 2 hours in the saddle. I can see if you're spending like 6 or 8 hours in the saddle on a bike like this, the amount of kind of shocks that get transferred up your spine if you're going over really poor road conditions builds up over the time that you're riding, and so it gets significantly worse. But with a small fuel tank, I would say this bike is for shorter trips, and certainly taking it through the local twisties has been exceptional fun, and I've really enjoyed it. I've been really, you know, kind of getting right into it and having a lot of fun and crouching right in, and as I said, you know, the peg to the seat ratio is perfect for me. The bars, while a little bit further out, it does let me get in quite aggressively when I'm having a bit of a hoon, and overall exceptional. The dash is a little bit on the lower side, so I do find I need to kind of glance down just a little bit to see that. There are quite busy controls here. As far as the ergos, probably the main thing you're thinking about is whether those levers are adjustable. They certainly are, which is a nice premium feature. And the end of bar mirrors, again, pretty good vision. Being round, it's a restricted field of view, but they do the job. Very little I can complain about there. One thing I will note on this particular bike is that's the bike upright. Onto that side stand, it does really bring the bike quite a way over, and that can feel a little bit strange. And I would, if you're parking it in gear, roll it forward until you're as far forward in gear as you can be, and then put it on the stand, because the bike does shift a little bit on the stand and it does have a tendency to roll on not flat terrain. So that's just a nice precaution to make sure that you don't put it on the stand and then find the bike rolls off it. So I guess I'd say the Harley-Davidson Sportster S, if you're interested in this machine, fairly traditional kind of cruiser style as far as forward controls, bit of a more sculpted seat because this is a more performance orientated machine. The bars, fairly wide, a little bit angled back towards the rider. For me, I'm longer legs and shorter torso. I found it perfect. Again, 180 centimeters, 32-inch inseam. A very, very comfortable overall machine, and I think it's going to suit smaller riders very well. So particularly if you're interested in this bike and you're in that category, definitely check it out, because I think you will be very, very impressed. And particularly if you're into a performance bike, which is still nice and low and easy to manage, this is definitely the one to look at. Anyway, if you've got any questions at all, let me know down below in the comments. As always, I will do my best to answer them. Thanks for watching, stay safe out there, and I'll be back soon. You can support the channel on Patreon.